The sky burned. It was not the warm, golden glow of a sunset, but a sickly, unnatural green that spread like a plague across the horizon. From the heart of New York City, Dr. Elena Carter stared upward, her breath catching in her throat as the first streaks of light pierced the atmosphere. They were not meteors. They moved with purpose, decelerating with impossible precision before vanishing behind the jagged silhouette of skyscrapers. The air grew heavy, charged with a static that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She clutched her lab coat tighter, her mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. This was no natural phenomenon. This was an arrival. Elena had always been a woman of science, grounded in the tangible, the measurable. As a leading astrophysicist at Columbia University, she had spent her career studying the cosmos, searching for signs of life beyond Earth. But this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The first explosion rocked the city before she could process the implications. A deafening roar tore through the air, followed by a shockwave that shattered windows and sent debris cascading into the streets. Elena stumbled, her ears ringing, as the ground beneath her feet trembled. Screams erupted around her, a cacophony of terror that drowned out all rational thought. She forced herself to move, her instincts screaming at her to find shelter. The streets were chaos, cars abandoned, people running in every direction, their faces masks of panic. Above, the green light intensified, and Elena caught her first glimpse of the invaders. They descended from the sky like shadows given form, their sleek, angular ships hovering silently before unleashing torrents of energy that reduced buildings to ash. The Krylos, as they would later be called, were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Their armor shimmered with an iridescent sheen, their movements fluid and precise, as though they were extensions of their machines. They moved with a cold, calculated efficiency, their intent clear. Annihilation. Elena ducked into an alley, her heart pounding as she pressed herself against the cold brick wall. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed her husband's number. No answer. She tried again, her breath coming in short, frantic gasps. Still nothing. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it down. There was no time for fear, no time for grief. She had to survive. She had to understand. The sound of footsteps snapped her back to the present. She turned, her eyes widening as a man in military fatigues rounded the corner, his rifle raised and his expression grim. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face that had seen too much war. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other, two strangers bound by the same desperate need to survive. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "It's not safe." Elena straightened, her scientist's mind already analyzing the situation. "Neither should you," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But here we are." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Captain Marcus Reed," he said, lowering his rifle slightly. 82nd Airborne, or what's left of it. "Dr. Elena Carter," she said, extending a hand. "Astrophysicist. And right now, probably one of the few people who can figure out what the hell is going on." Marcus studied her for a moment, his gaze sharp and assessing. Then he gestured for her to follow. "Come on. We've got a safe house a few blocks from here. If you're as smart as you say, we're going to need you." The safe house was a crumbling apartment building, its windows boarded up and its entrance guarded by a handful of soldiers. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the dim light casting long shadows across the faces of the survivors. Elena scanned the room, her mind already cataloging the resources at their disposal. It wasn't much. A few weapons, some basic medical supplies, and a handful of people who looked more terrified than capable. But it was a start. Marcus led her to a makeshift command center, where a map of the city was spread out on a table, marked with red circles and hastily scribbled notes. "They hit us hard and fast," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "We've lost contact with most of our units. Command's gone dark. We're on our own." Elena leaned over the map, her eyes narrowing as she studied the patterns. "They're targeting infrastructure," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. Power grids, communication hubs, transportation networks. They're not just trying to kill us, they're trying to cripple us. Yeah, we figured that out, Marcus said dryly. What we don't know is why, or how to stop them. Elena straightened, her mind racing. Their technology is unlike anything we've ever seen. But it's not magic. It's science. And if it's science, we can understand it. We can fight it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You got a plan, Doc? Not yet, she admitted. But I will. Just give me some time. Time, however, was a luxury they didn't have. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the walls, a grim reminder of the enemy's relentless advance. Elena turned to Marcus, her expression determined. We need to find a way to disrupt their communication. If we can isolate their units, we might stand a chance. Marcus nodded, his respect for her growing. All right, let's get to work. As the hours passed, Elena and Marcus worked side by side, their partnership forged in the crucible of desperation. Elena's scientific expertise and Marcus's tactical knowledge complemented each other, and together they began to piece together a plan. They discovered that the Krylos relied on a hive mind network, their movements coordinated with eerie precision. But the network had a weakness. It was vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. Using scavenged parts from abandoned electronics, Elena rigged a crude EMP device. It was far from perfect, but it was their best shot. Marcus assembled a small team of soldiers, their faces grim but determined. They would strike at a Krylos outpost, testing the device and buying humanity a glimmer of hope. The mission was a blur of chaos and adrenaline. The outpost was heavily guarded, but Marcus's team moved with precision, their training evident in every step. Elena stayed back, her heart in her throat as she watched the battle unfold. When the EMP device was finally activated, the effect was immediate. The Krylos faltered, their movements becoming disjointed and uncoordinated. For the first time, they seemed vulnerable. The team retreated, their mission a success. But as they returned to the safe house, the weight of what they had done settled over them. This was not a victory, not yet. It was a small step, a proof of concept. The Krylos were still out there, their ships still darkening the sky. But for the first time since the invasion began, Elena allowed herself to hope. They had struck back, and if they could do it once, they could do it again. As the sun set, or what passed for a sun in the smog-choked sky, Elena stood beside Marcus, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But they had taken the first step. And for now, that was enough. The EMP device had worked, better than anyone had dared to hope. The Krylos outpost had been thrown into disarray, their hive mind network disrupted long enough for Marcus and his team to strike. But as the survivors regrouped in the safe house, the air was thick with tension. The victory was small, a flicker of light in an otherwise unrelenting darkness. It was enough to keep them going, but not enough to change the tide. Not yet. Elena sat hunched over a makeshift workbench, her fingers flying across the keyboard of a salvaged laptop. The screen glowed faintly in the dim light, lines of code and schematics reflecting in her glasses. She had been working tirelessly since their return, her mind consumed by the need to understand the Krylos. Their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, but it was not invincible. There had to be a weakness, a flaw in their design. She just had to find it. Marcus watched her from across the room, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. He had seen that look before, the single-minded focus, the relentless drive. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of soldiers who had stared death in the face and refused to blink. Elena was a fighter, even if she didn't carry a gun. And right now, she was their best hope. "You need to rest," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Elena didn't look up. "I'm fine," she said, her tone clipped. "We don't have time to rest. Every second we waste, they're getting stronger." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. He knew she was right, but he also knew the toll this was taking on her. They were all running on fumes, but Elena was pushing herself to the brink. He moved closer, leaning against the edge of the table. "What are you working on?" She hesitated, then turned the laptop toward him. The screen displayed a complex diagram of what appeared to be a neural network, its nodes connected by glowing lines. "This is their hive mind," she explained, her voice tinged with excitement. "It's not just a communication system, it's their entire command structure. Every Krylos unit is connected to it, acting as a single entity. That's why they're so efficient. That's why they're so dangerous." Marcus frowned, studying the diagram. "So if we take out the hive mind, we take out their entire army?" "In theory," Elena said, nodding. "But it's not that simple. The hive mind is controlled by a central AI, located on their mothership. It's the brain of their operation. If we can disrupt it, we can sever their connection to the ground forces. But we'd need to get close, too close for comfort." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had seen the mothership, a massive, ominous presence in the sky that seemed to mock their every move. Getting anywhere near it would be suicide. But what choice did they have? "What else?" he asked, his voice low. Elena hesitated again, then pulled up another file. This one contained images of the Krylos themselves, their sleek, insectoid forms captured in stark detail. "There's something else," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not just machines. They're biological, and they're dependent on something, a mineral, rare and unstable. It's what powers their hive mind, what keeps them connected. Without it, they're nothing." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "So if we cut off their supply, we cripple them," Elena finished. "But the mineral is only found on their home planet. They've been mining it here on Earth to sustain their forces. If we can destroy their mining operations, we can buy ourselves some time." Marcus straightened, his mind racing. It was a long shot, but it was the best lead they had. "Where are they mining?" Elena pulled up a map, her finger tracing a line to a remote region in the mountains. "Here," she said. "It's heavily guarded, but if we can get in, we can destroy their equipment. It won't stop them completely, but it'll slow them down." Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then that's where we go." The mission was a suicide run, and everyone knew it. But there was no other choice. Marcus assembled a small team of his best soldiers, their faces grim but determined. Elena insisted on coming, despite Marcus's protests. "You're too valuable," he had said, his voice firm. "We can't risk losing you. And I can't risk losing this." She had shot back, her eyes blazing. "I'm the only one who knows how to disable their equipment. I'm coming, whether you like it or not." In the end, he had relented. They needed her expertise, and she was too stubborn to be left behind. The journey to the mining site was fraught with danger, the landscape a barren wasteland of ash and rubble. The Krylos had left their mark everywhere, their ships patrolling the skies like vultures. The team moved under cover of darkness, their progress slow and deliberate. When they finally reached the mining site, it was a sight to behold. The Krylos had transformed the mountainside into a sprawling complex, their machines digging deep into the earth. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning rock, and the ground trembled with the force of their drills. The team took up positions, their hearts pounding as they prepared to strike. The plan was simple. Infiltrate the complex, plant explosives on the mining equipment, and get out before the Krylos knew what hit them. But nothing ever went according to plan. The moment they breached the perimeter, all hell broke loose. The Krylos were on them in an instant, their weapons blazing. Marcus and his team fought with everything they had, their movements fueled by desperation. Elena moved with purpose, her focus unwavering as she planted the charges. The Krylos were closing in, their numbers overwhelming, but she refused to falter. She had come too far to fail now. The final charge was set just as Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Time to go!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the chaos. They ran, the sound of gunfire and explosions echoing behind them. The charges detonated in a series of deafening blasts, the mining complex collapsing in on itself. The Krylos were thrown into disarray, their operations crippled. But the victory came at a cost. Not everyone made it out. Back at the safe house, the mood was somber. They had struck a blow against the Krylos, but the price had been high. Elena sat in silence, her hands trembling as she stared at the floor. Marcus watched her, his expression unreadable. "You did good," he said finally, his voice soft. "We couldn't have done it without you." Elena looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and determination. "It's not enough," she said. "We need to hit them harder. We need to take out their mothership." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then that's what we'll do." The section ends with the survivors regrouping, their resolve stronger than ever. The Krylos had been dealt a blow, but the war was far from over. The mothership loomed in the distance, a silent reminder of the challenges ahead. But for the first time there was a glimmer of hope. They had struck back and they would do it again, no matter the cost. The sky split open with a searing green light, and the world erupted into chaos. Dr. Elena Carter froze mid-step, her coffee cup slipping from her hand to shatter on the pavement. Above her, the clouds churned like a living thing, and from their depths descended sleek, angular ships that defied every law of physics she had spent her career studying. The air crackled with energy, a metallic tang burning her throat as the first explosion rocked the city. Screams filled the air, a symphony of terror that drowned out all rational thought. Elena's mind raced, her scientific instincts warring with the primal urge to run. She had always believed in the possibility of extraterrestrial life, had even dedicated her life to searching for it. But this was no peaceful first contact. The ships moved with predatory grace, their weapons carving through skyscrapers as if they were made of paper. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and she stumbled, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to move, had to find shelter, but her legs refused to obey. A hand grabbed her arm, yanking her into the shadow of a crumbling building. Elena gasped, her eyes locking onto the face of a man in military fatigues. His expression was grim, his grip firm but not unkind. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's not safe." Elena blinked, her mind struggling to process the words. I was just," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Doesn't matter," he interrupted, his eyes scanning the chaos around them. "Name's Marcus, Captain Marcus Reed. And right now, you're coming with me if you want to live." Elena nodded, her survival. Elena's eyes narrowed, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Give me time," she said, her voice firm. "I'll find a way." Marcus nodded, his respect for her growing. "Time's one thing we don't have much of, but we'll make it work." As the sounds of battle echoed in the distance, Elena felt a spark of determination ignite within her. The invaders had come to kill, to destroy, but they had underestimated humanity, and that, she vowed, would be their mistake.